Hi guys, I'm coming at you from my at-home studio, and I'm going to be sharing some different projects and things that you can do while you're at home during this break. I know that a lot of things are uncertain and that we feel like we can't control a lot of the things going on. But one thing you can control is how you feel and how you react to what's happening. So one thing that I like to do is do things that I really enjoy, like drawing or yoga, listening to audiobooks, things like that that make me feel better and help me live well. So one of the things I'm going to share with you today is called a Zentangle. You've probably heard of this before, but if you haven't, it's a meditative drawing technique that allows you to focus on the task at hand, and it kind of calms you down as you do it. So I'll be sharing some of my examples of Zentangles I've done so far and show you how to do them. Okay, so I thought I'd start today by showing you some of the Zentangle examples that I have done so far on break. This is the big one that you saw in the beginning. My fiance Nathan and I have been working on. It's nowhere near finished, so I'll have to get back at you with how we finish it off, but that is our big collaborative Zentangle that we're working on. I also have a smaller Zentangle I've been working on that I think is done in my watercolor sketchbook. So this one, I did a little bit of watercolor paint in the background, like a little gradient, and then I went in with a thicker Sharpie and made some of these big shapes so that way I had some spaces to fill in with my Zentangle patterns. So that's another option that you can do if you want to make your own background before you start. You certainly can. But today I'm just going to be using some very simple supplies. I have my copy paper here. So this is just regular plain white paper that you get from a printer. You can also use any paper that you have, like from a notebook. You could even draw on top of a newspaper if you wanted to. That kind of provides some good layering of text and images for you. I have lots of different pens and Sharpies that I can use to add different thicknesses of line. Again, if you don't have these at home, you could also use colored pencils, you could use markers, regular pencil works fine too. Anything that you want to draw with is completely fine. Zentangles are traditionally in black and white because they provide a lot of contrast, but you definitely do not have to use black and white. You could use color if you wanted to. Alright, so we're going to start today by dividing up our paper. That just means that I need to draw some shapes or lines on my paper so that way I have some spaces that are smaller that I can fill in with my patterns. So you can do that lots of different ways. I could get a circle and I could trace around my circle to have different circles around my page so that way I have that to fill in. You could draw like a flower or a dragon and you could fill that in with Zentangles. I think I'm just going to start today by drawing some lines from corner to corner on my paper and kind of see where that takes me. So nothing fancy here, I'm just kind of freehanding it. I'm happy with that. But again, if you wanted to use something to trace, I have a bunch of different objects at hand right now. I could do a circular one. Maybe it kind of looks like bubbles are floating on my paper. And I could fill those bubbles in with different patterns. I'm doing it with pencil first because as you can see when I trace that circle, it gets a little wonky, so I want to be able to fix that later on. So that's another way that you could go about dividing up your paper. I'm going to go back to this one and draw on this one today. Another great resource you can look up easily is you can just search Zentangle patterns. I'm not sure how good you can see this on the camera, but I just looked up Zentangle patterns and it gives you a lot of really good patterns to go off of. You, of course, do not have to follow these patterns or copy any other pattern. You can come up with them in your head if you'd like to, but sometimes I get a little stuck, so these kind of provide some good inspiration for me to go back to and look at if I need it, if I get stuck. So I'm going to have that on the side, and I'm just going to start filling in with my pattern. I think I'm going to start with a kind of swirl one. So I'm just going to go in with a pen and do some simple swirls. So Zentangle patterns often look really complicated and kind of hard to do. That is because they have so much detail in them, but a way that makes it a little bit easier for yourself is to think about dividing it up. So I'm kind of going off of this, I don't know if you can see it very well on my computer, but this kind of swirl design, and that looks pretty detailed. It's not super complicated, but it has some complicated lines in it that might look kind of hard to do. You want to break it down into steps for yourself. So just start big. So start with your bigger shapes and your spaces, and then get smaller. Work on your smaller lines and shapes that are inside those big shapes that you drew first. That will kind of make it a little bit easier for you to tackle. So now I can kind of go in and start adding in some of those more complicated lines that I see in that picture. So I could go into each little swirl that I drew and add in all of these little tiny lines. That's going to make my drawing look more detailed and add some really cool depth to it too. So just play around with your different shapes. The thing about Zentangle is it's not about how it comes out really. Often they come out looking pretty cool and you end up with an awesome picture when you're done. But the main focus of a Zentangle, like I said, is for you to enjoy the process of drawing, to enjoy that slowing down, to really focus on what you're doing, and just kind of be at peace. For me, that happens a lot when I'm drawing. I feel very peaceful. So I enjoy this kind of act of just focusing on what I'm doing and not thinking about anything else. Okay, so I'm going to keep going on this, keep drawing in all those lines. So I'm not super happy with how this one looks, but I think it's fine. I'm just going to move on, leave it. Maybe I'll come back and add something to it later on that makes me a little bit happier with it. But I'm just going to move on to a different little section. One thing that makes Zentangles kind of pop and look cool is to have different thicknesses of line and have different amounts of black and white in the different sections you have. So I think this next one that I'm going to do, since this one overall is really thin, I use really thin lines to draw, I'm going to go in with my big Sharpie and divide it up with some nice thick black lines. So this is going to add some interesting contrast to my drawing overall. So this is going to kind of help it look a little bit more interesting visually. So I'm just going to add some squiggles. Again, I'm just breaking up that big space with some big lines to start off with, and then I'll get small, focus in a little bit more and do some more detail. Okay, on to the next one. I'm going to do one more complicated pattern with you guys, and then I'll kind of just zip through the rest of it. This next one I think I'm going to do is one I like to do a lot. That kind of starts with some upside down U shapes. Okay, now I have these U shapes and I'm going to go back in and kind of add some smaller lines, kind of following that curve of the U. Another thing to remember when you're doing your Zentangles is that don't let yourself get hung up on mistakes. So I've noticed I've made several mistakes in mine so far, such as going over lines, not staying inside my boxes, or just things I don't really care for. That's okay. There's going to be so much going on in your awesome artwork that you're not even really going to be noticing those tiny mistakes. No one else is going to see them. Again, it's about the process, so just enjoy making it and have some fun with it.